recording. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Jeanette's session. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to you all to start asking any questions. And Jeanette, if there's anything else you feel like you'd want to share a little more in depth, but I think maybe you were starting off with a question and answering already.
Amy Poland from Maine had mentioned that she locally within her state is working on professional development, and the content of this morning's session, or this afternoon actually, PD section personalized professional development plans fed well into the next step for them. And Amy, and I don't want to keep talking, so I can let you share.
Well, we are working on some kind of professional development pathways around distance and blended learning, and looking at like what would be some important skills that someone would need at hire versus maybe after a year, after a couple of years. And so we've been trying to think about like, okay, what happens next? And so my question actually, Jeanette, that I put in the chat was, and you sort of answered part of it during your presentation, is how do you anticipate kind of using these plans to help you with professional development, not just at a state level, but also like with the local program administrators?
So in the full session, I knew we had some New Hampshire participants, and so I was very careful because some of what we were sharing today is coming down the road for the state, and so I knew that they wouldn't be ready to hear everything in full detail. But for this smaller group, even though it's recorded, we are looking at long-term, does it make sense? How can we help professionalize the field? And it hasn't been decided yet, but it's also looking like professional development plans may become a requirement in the near future. Currently, every practitioner, the rule in New Hampshire is within a year and a half, everyone is required to go through a new staff development training program, which is historically was a 6-hour fire hose effective information in one Saturday, which I am super happy to announce that it's being transformed into an asynchronous Canvas course to give people time to really ruminate with the resources, ask questions, and spend a good deal of time of learning. With that, those professional development plans and self-assessments, digital literacy skills, all of that is embedded within the course. So the piece, those are for all new staff. For current staff members, I will be working, again, because New Hampshire is a local control state, in conjunction with the local program administrators in supporting them with personalized professional development plans. We may oversee them, come in, look at them, help adjust, and then offer our mentor services as needed, in the different facets and areas that locally and even regionally. So if we recognize or notice that there's commonality in needs or supports, then we will develop training targeted to those specific needs. But for the most part, our intention is to work one-on-one to support practitioners. And our end goal is really to make this a positive growth mindset, to model with our practitioners what we wish for them to model with their students.
So Jeanette, there's a question about how many practitioners do you have in New Hampshire when you're talking about this individualized model?
So it fluctuates. Right now is less than we've really ever had, but with the number of programs, we're looking at probably between 200, 250 practitioners.
I'm Yvette from Washington, D.C., LYC Career Academy.
Hi, Yvette.
And I'm curious about, because it just like I think it was Amy, right? Amy Poland, yes. So just like Amy, we were looking into doing something like that. I even started like creating some modules in Canvas, you know, for the teachers. And because I recognize that, you know, we have been, they have been very gracious, and they have taken this responsibility of teaching the students during COVID and all of that, and using all these digital resources, sometimes learning while on the go. And but when we created a survey of needs, surprisingly, they were asking for, we need more training on blended learning, we need more training on hybrid, and then this, what you presented really makes a lot of sense. And this is the irony, the irony that I wanted to share, is that we use personalized learning for our students. But it didn't occur to me that I could also use the same approach for the instructors, you know? So that is something that I really appreciate about your presentation. And just like Amy, I was taking notes and making sure that I didn't miss anything. And I'm very thankful for the links that you provided, so that, you know, I'm definitely going to be using that for this year and the next.
Oh, good. Thank you for that, Yvette. I think you've brought up some many great points. When I step back in my role as a PD coordinator, I oftentimes, I try not to, because I do try to look at the glass as being more full than empty, but I also see parallels between New Hampshire adult, not just New Hampshire adult ed, but adult educators as a whole across the nation are oftentimes, or more than likely, part-time, right? So they already have competing priorities. So for me, in the back of my head, that is a parallel to our adult learners. They always come to us with competing priorities. And so how do we help them prioritize? And that's, you know, part of the professional development and professional learning goals in helping our instructors develop the SMART goals and some plans for professional growth, again, is a natural way to model growth in our students. When you have a plan and put it in place, you have goals and milestones that you're working toward, and this supports our students in doing the same thing. It is so important to recognize and see growth happening, because when I have so many priorities that are competing for my attention, and I don't stop to reflect on anything, sometimes I miss. I'm like, oh, you know, I mean, this happened and it resonated with me, and I wanted to change this, and this is an area that I've learned something new. Quite frankly, the couple of things that I shared today, when I was a student going through ISTE certification for educators, I learned so much just going through that process, because we heard it as a result of Jamie and Allison's content that they shared. We have to, you know, start thinking of things from a growth mindset. And so I'm very long-winded. I always am. I apologize for that. But I really truly see the parallels between practitioners in professional learning growth and students in their learning growths as well. I'm just stopping to read some of what's here. Oh, Nell, I love that. Is that shared locally or with colleagues, the Google Club?
So the Google Club is something we're doing. It's virtual, so literally anyone can join. We started a year ago. We have about 27 people who show up pretty consistently. It's once a month. It's an hour. It was an hour long, and they asked it to go to an hour and a half. And we kind of, in some ways, we're not modeling on this, but having come to some of these sessions, we now sort of use the first hour for presentation and then have a half hour at the end where we try to create some sort of activity for the teachers to do in breakout rooms. We thought there would be more coming to share what we've learned, and we found that they really just want, they want us to present. So we tend to present, but then we want to give, sort of stir the bucket a little bit. And the personal learning plans came from that, because I would do a lot of workshops where, the workshop would be called how to use Google Slides to make ebooks. And we would start off by asking everyone, why did you choose this workshop? Why, what did you want to learn? And they'd be like, just everything. I want everything Google. And I'm like, I hear you, but now it's just it's gonna flow over you. You haven't created a space for it. And afterwards you won't kind of remember, you can go back and maybe look at the folder, but like we want people to sort of set intention, and then also be able to, as you say, reflect on what they've learned. And pandemic times obviously has been an amazing, people have very much taken what they learned in a workshop today and used it the next day or 5 minutes after the workshop's over. But we still feel that it's been interesting to watch, because these people are coming, this is not paid time, it's not paid. In New York State, we have 14 hours required professional development that's brought out by a different group of people. So anything I'm doing, they're coming on their own for their own knowledge. And we're so impressed that this group of people just consistently come and are very engaged and have really good questions. But we still felt that they just we're trying out the idea of the personal learning plan for that reason, to help them really get down to what is it that you would really like to know, and short-term goals, right? Like, so we've used some digital skill inventories to help them identify what they would like to learn. I think North Star has like a Google Docs assessment, which I took, and it's good. So some of them might take that to identify the areas that they need help in. But yeah, we're just seeing that the teachers are still really challenged. And as we start to move back to in person, where maybe the majority of our classes have been remote and most students are coming via their phone. So actively putting digital literacy skills into instruction has been limited, but we think as we move back to in person, that's going to happen, and our teachers need those digital skills first. So that's where we're working from. But I love the form that you shared, and we definitely need more assessments. I think that's true for students and for teachers, to help identify what are the actual digital skills that we're really trying to get to.
So our goal for both of the assessments that I did share, they're both self-assessments, and we did that. That was intentional, because we don't want, or we didn't want excess pressure on our practitioners. We already know that, and here I am breaking this rule already. I'm thinking in terms of the deficit. Our practitioners, many practitioners in New Hampshire come from other careers, or they don't have a background in education. So there's a steep learning curve. And so really, thinking about how can we support them with the tools and resources they need to be successful. So almost flipping it, trying to help them be, positive and grow together with their students. So I love hearing what you're saying. And I also want to respond and say, in New Hampshire, we're hearing and feeling the same thing. I had this conversation with Jen Vanek and Destiny yesterday. We had a separate meeting, and I had mentioned there's a frequent request for what does it look like in practice? You say, you give us all these tools and resources and, integrate into digital literacy or Edtech tools in the learning environment, but what's it look like? Help us figure out what does it actually look like in practice. And so that's another vision I have for the micro course is creating a couple activities for practitioners to either work individually or perhaps in small groups of what could it look like, and trying to tease out the active engagement. So it's not just the onus isn't on us as PD, but getting the practitioners to dip their toes in and get over that fear. Just try it. It's okay to fail. Just try. And that's also why I deliberately led with the slides that I did. kind of set in that stage, because I feel that it's so super important. As educators, we oftentimes have this idea that we have to be perfect, that we have to know everything inside and out, and that's just not true. It's not true. We all need to grow together.
It's interesting that you just said that, Jeanette, because I have been thinking about how digital literacy, although it's been such a big challenge for all of us, and it's presented some really complicated obstacles, it has also been like the great equalizer that puts kind of that teacher student power imbalance like right where it needs to be. I feel like, in terms of, we're both learners, we can support each other, we're adults, we all, you know, like we're in this together kind of thing, other than, you know, this I hold the knowledge and I'm giving it to you from my bank, you know. So that was just interesting to me. I was just in a training, a Jamboard training with a lot of teachers, and a lot of range of ability that they brought to the table. And it's just like, it's exactly like the kind of thing that I was facing in an ESOL classroom with students with a lot of range, with ability, with technology. You know, it's like a mirror image almost. So it's really an interesting question to say, how do we go from teaching that, you know, in a classroom environment to a PD environment? What is the difference between teaching and PD, really? So yeah, just interesting questions. Thanks for sharing today. I wasn't there, but I've gone through the slides already, and I love it. So thanks.
And I think that
makes an interesting point, because I think in what I've observed is that it's sort of made teachers aware who maybe have been teaching for a long time the same thing the same way, suddenly say, oh wait, that approach doesn't work. And that's why my students aren't understanding, or that it's made them sort of tweak because they suddenly have an awareness of being a learner that they maybe haven't been a learner other than in a one-off PD webinar where someone feeds you information and you take it in. And so I think that's a really interesting point. I wanted to go back to something that Nell said about teachers coming and wanting to put them in breakout rooms, but they really just want the information and to walk away with it. And I was thinking, you know, we all know that high quality PD is not a one-off, right? And so I'm thinking about the idea that maybe these plans help us with that, because they create a way for teachers to sort of, over time, I can put a one-off in there. Which one of my goals or my areas of need is that going to help me meet? And what does that look like afterwards? How am I going to use that information? So I don't know, that just really helped me think about that, more intentional planning about how you hit what you're working on.
And we've seen a thing with some instructors who, because they go to regular PD through their programs or they're paid to go by their program, they kind of feel like the PD is for their program and not for them. And what we were trying, we haven't done it now, but we had some other projects where we were sort of thinking about, like, you know, micro credentials or badges that teachers could get, so they understood that this was actually for them. That they owned it and it went with them where they went, because it's partly our system. Our system is, if you work for this organization, you have to go do assessment training. Technically, if you go to another organization, you're gonna have to do that assessment training again, because that's how the PD is tracked. That doesn't make me feel as a teacher then that that's me being trained, right? Like that feels like it's somehow related to my program. So this idea, we have, similar to New Hampshire, we don't have any requirement. Teachers who teach adults don't have to be certified. There's some programs that require that, some don't. Some programs require a master's, some don't. So when we're doing PD, we're, with all of these things, it's that differentiated instruction where people are coming in, and tech has always been that, right? Like the things I know how to do in Excel are different than the things you know how to do in Excel. And even if we were both seasoned and use it every day, we could find that we don't know how to do the thing the other person knows how to do. So tech has always been an area, I think, where teachers and practitioners can feel what it feels like to be a student, and it's challenging. And so many people have so much, worry, and so we've seen that a lot with our work with teachers.
Rachel, thank you for sharing. Sorry, Dustin.
No, go for it.
PD with purpose. I mean, because I think that's phenomenal. And to address both Nell and Amy, I don't want to say address, that's probably the wrong word, to touch upon what you're referencing. We struggle with that in New Hampshire as well, in terms of the one-offs, or really, how do you know that once a practitioner has received content, what they've done with it? How have they put it, what they received for PD, into practice? So there's also another long-term goal of mine, is to connect, to help our practitioners to follow up with intentional surveys and connections, and long-term with the personalized professional development plans. And when I go out to programs, this hasn't happened yet, but my goal is to start asking practitioners, hey, Nell, I noticed that you've been to these last 3 trainings. How is that going? What have you put into practice? And if you haven't, what has been your challenge? And it might be the perfect opportunity to dive into what other supports do you need to put this into place.
Jeanette, thanks for sharing that. Rachel had typed in the chat, if you didn't see it, about an Edtech Makerspace. And so for some of you, that might not be a phrase that's very familiar to you. So Rachel, do you mind just explaining what that is and telling people about how it works?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And for anybody who's heard this spiel a million times, feel free to take a nap. So the Edtech Makerspace is, like I said, it's PD with purpose. And so it's this idea of getting educators together and at all of their different levels, giving them a space where they can learn EdTech, but they can also apply their learning and receive guidance and support. And it's kind of like an extended process. And throughout that process, they are creating open educational resources. So they also feel not just that they're learning ed tech for their own knowledge, but that they're also contributing resources to the field of adult ed, or in a smaller setting, just within their program, by creating. So for example, right now we're doing one with the Florida Literacy Coalition's Staying Healthy curriculum. And that's what I just got out of. And so we have this great PDF curriculum, but it's not very useful in a distance learning environment, or just it doesn't have any tech involved. And so in terms of integrating digital literacy, it's not great. So what we're doing is we're taking those activities, and we've got a group of educators together. They're learning tech tools like Jamboard, Quizlet, Wakelet. And as they're learning, they are applying that new knowledge to create the activities for the curriculum. So it's purposeful in the way that we are addressing different levels of skills, and it's purposeful in that they are creating resources that they can go straight into their classroom when they're done and start using, So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm actually excited. I believe Linda, Linda is from New Hampshire. She is on my team. I am very excited to have Linda, and she has decided to jump into that EdTech Makerspace pilot. So she gets to learn alongside you, Rachel, which will be exciting. One thing, excuse me, one thing that I wanted to circle back to, it relates to all of this, and Nell, is a little bit also what you were referencing before. You had mentioned that, throughout the pandemic and learning in a distance or a remote learning setting, but we recently in New Hampshire, we've had conversations with our practitioners about shifting to, yes, getting more students as they feel more comfortable back into the classroom, but we also recognize that it is never going to be just in the classroom anymore. And so we set an intention and a conscious effort to update our distance and blended learning plans, distance ed plans. We have to, because all of the original plans and protocols that we have in place were meant for primary classroom was the classroom was the primary mode of learning, and distance learning was supplemental. Now we're shifting to ensure that our protocols and policies remain update or get updated so that they can include intentional use, daily use, as often as possible. And we recognize that this is important because we had, or I had a conversation a few days ago with one of our ESL practitioners, and I was amazed. This man is he's a very accomplished ESL instructor. He works for a university, works for adult ed. I mean, it's just, he's phenomenal. However, when I reminded him about the tools and resources available to him to integrate digital literacy skills in his ESL classrooms, he's like, wow, thank you. Because as an ESL instructor, it's very easy for me to say, that's not what I'm doing. I'm here to help improve English language acquisition skills. And as much as we feel that we've given this information out, it's just so important to reinforce and keep providing resources and tools for our practitioners. And that when we request what things look like in action or in the classroom, that's why we have to have these concrete examples to support our practitioners. And that's one of the reasons why I'm super excited about the DRAW initiative, because I know that they are building the concrete examples of what it looks like in practice.
And I'd like to comment on the professional development piece that includes the reflection at the end. I think a lot of teachers are doing wonderful things. And I think sometimes at the end of the day, what they're doing gets buried up in some of the other things that are difficult for them. So I think if they're, as part of the professional development plan, they can reflect on what baby step did they take. If that's all they could do for one day is to model using a keyboard or to model using Google Drive. And I think as they have a collection of their reflections, I think it'll help them to build some confidence and some confidence, and maybe even to share with that professor, who only thinks sort of maybe that he's doing a good job without any technology. So it creates a community that has a focus, and it's informal. It's just a way to bring some language to the fact that, yeah, I did this. And, wouldn't it be wonderful if there were makerspace days more frequently, so that, at the local level, somebody could say, this was how I integrated Wakelet into my lesson plan. So I think that sharing and that reflection is huge. So that's sort of my idea of contextualizing it for teachers. We think of contextualizing it for students, we're thinking that all of the time. But I think when you're trying to embrace a new skill, right, you need it to be meaningful. We all need it to be meaningful. And so those are the parts that Jeanette spoke about that I'm really excited about. So we can take the formalities of learning technology away and just bring it down to a personal level. And hopefully along the way, it's fun or less stressful.
Right, absolutely. One last plug. I want to thank Amy Poland for offering New Hampshire to participate with Maine in terms of engaging in 2 upcoming pilots, really. So building an EdTech strategy toolkit, New Hampshire and Maine will be participating in soon, and then in Edtech Makerspace later on down the road. And Amy, I'm just putting a plug in. I have not talked to Jen. Destiny, I will talk to Jen. But we talked about New Hampshire, perhaps next year, contemplating, thinking about, I really want to do this, a HiFlex pilot. And so I thought of you. I thought of Maine.
Thank you. And it's nice that Ideal lets us be able to partner on things like this to save a little money.
Yes.
Yeah, we love all the partnerships that come out of the Ideal Consortium. So since you mentioned it, Jeanette, I'll just mention that Jen Vanek, David Rosen, and I are developing a guide for HiFlex that we hope to be out late spring, early summer. It's a program that'll be open resource, so you'll be able to get it from EdTech books and use and adapt however you'd like. And we're doing it by building it off of Brian Beatty's book. And in addition to that, interviewing practitioners all across the country who are doing high flex to really find out where they're at, what's working, what isn't. And we're really excited to have that available in the next couple of months. So we have about 2 more minutes. Are there any other questions or chat? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask Jeanette questions or type them in the chat if you feel more comfortable that way.
As you're doing that, I just wanted to circle back to Nell and thank her for sharing the Google Club. This is so you invited here so anyone across the nation can join. How exciting.
We would love that. I mean, our goal, so I'm not doing it for COA because I hadn't got it together, but I am hoping to present at Alaska State Conference on our Google Club, because it is both the idea of sort of, I think ultimately we want lots and lots of Google Clubs, not just one that everybody comes to, but I think that the model for that sustained, it's worked. Like, we weren't sure if everyone would want to meet once a month. It's a 4 p.m. It's kind of a weird time, but for teachers, it's kind of a good time probably for most of ours, because they're either doing morning or evening classes. And then I think, I don't know if the pandemic changed things as well, because I remember hearing about learning circles and P2P University and all these amazing things where people would kind of come together physically at a library and work together. And I was very intrigued by that, because I personally do learn really well if I have someone I've made an appointment with. I'm not going to do the work myself. I need to, like, oh my gosh, I feel really guilty, I didn't do my homework, I'm going to see someone tomorrow, I better do it. So that idea of having someone, like an appointment with somebody, but we didn't know if people would physically come for an hour in New York City, traveling around, like, the subway, whatever. So before pandemic, we weren't really sure if we could do it virtually or not. And now, why not? Like, it's been amazing. So again, our biggest challenge still is getting the members, because they're members, not participants, right? Getting them to feel like that it's their space to bring what they've learned. We have a few people who shared, but it still feels very much this model that people kind of like, which is like, I'm going to come and just have it flow over me. But we're getting there. And the personal learning network, the personal learning plans just started last month. So we're going to actually be checking in on them. And then the reason we're concentrating on the Google site and Blogger for this time is because we're making a site like that. So we'll have that for all the content that comes from Google Club. So there'll be a place to go back and get that content, because right now you got a link when you arrived, but you didn't, if you lost it or something, you don't have anywhere to go back. So we're kind of demonstrating how we're using a website and Blogger to track the content of our club, which you could do as a teacher for your class if you wanted to.
I love it, because it speaks to that professional learning network that I had referenced, and it's just a great place to learn and grow together.
Yeah.
So, well, we're at our time. We're actually a little bit past our time, but I want to thank you so much, Jeanette, for sharing all the good work you're doing in New Hampshire. I appreciate everyone that joined the breakout room that's sharing what you're doing locally as well, and all the work that you're doing to support our adult learners. So the resources will be sent out to you shortly, along with an evaluation that we hope that you give us some feedback, as well as any future topics you'd love to hear. So thank you so much. Have a great week. End.